Good afternoon. I'd like to welcome you to the Process and Formula Overview webinar. I'm BJ Yoder. I'm in the Tech Support Department here at Almax, and I'll be conducting your webinar today. Almax Software wants to thank everyone for signing up. Most attendees have signed in, so we're going to go ahead and begin our webinar. I want to go over some introductory items for the webinars that we have. First of all, we have multiple attendees, so because of this, I have muted everyone, and we encourage you to ask questions by typing them into your chat window. We have techs on standby to answer your questions, and every attendee will receive a transcript of those questions with the responses. Also, keep in mind we're conducting this webinar online, so if there's any internet-related delays or interruptions occurring, this will not affect the recording. Everyone will be receiving a recording of each of the sessions, so don't worry if you get pulled away from your computer or you miss a particular section of the webinar. Now, with that being said, one of the things that with this webinar today, the Process Formula Overview webinar that we're doing, is this is going to build on a foundation for what is going to take place over the next couple weeks. The next two sessions that we have available, we're going to get more in depth of the process section of the programs and the formula section as well. So don't be discouraged if we're seeing not as much detail as you expect on this first one. It's an overview to make an understanding of what process and formula what it is in the program. First of all, so over the next three sessions in this series, we will be covering an overview of the process formulas in version 11.24, how process benefits you and your organization by using it, the creation of a process and the formulas associated with them. We will also be covering custom formula creation, the use of the function help and all other helps that is available to you as well. And also we'll be doing example creation of custom formulas when we get to that third session in the webinar series. So first of all, what I want to do is I want to kind of go over one of the biggest questions that we have is how does Almax program compare to Excel? And we cover this just from the dealing with being able to understand the differences between a database and a spreadsheet, because it kind of helps with the formula aspect of the program. So to understand that, first of all, when dealing with formulas in the Operator10 and Synexus programs, one of the things you need to understand is how they work and how they differ from developing things in a spreadsheet like Excel. With that said, let's go back to the understanding of the two programs and the differences of them. So first of all, the big question is, how is data stored? Well, think of the spreadsheet as a two-dimensional function of data. When we say two-dimensional, it's basically having length or width or rows and columns. Say you enter a piece of data into a cell, for example, located that at column C in row 30. Well, that piece of data then stays there. There's only certain ways that data can go anywhere else. First of all, you can only enter it there unless you create a formula to link it to another cell or spreadsheet or a graph or a program, or re-enter that value elsewhere. Okay, so if we enter that value into C30, that's where that value stays. We're not going to be able to see it anywhere else unless we do one of those things that I mentioned. Now, when we look at a database, think of it as a three-dimensional being or entity. When we do that, yes, we have length and width, but we also have depth. So that third dimension of the depth automatically makes the data available to other lists and formulas and data views and whatever, in our case data views, or anywhere else in the program that is needed. So in Operator 10 and its Nexus, when we enter a piece of data into our data entry data view and we enter it to one of those values, we are associating that with location and parameters. So when we enter that, as long as we have access to that location parameter anywhere in our reports or on our data views, we'll see that value for that given date and time. And it makes it magically appear everywhere else. So when we look at in Excel for a formula standpoint, you would want to be giving it, you're creating a formula for a given cell. So in doing so, what you're going to do is you're going to pick a function. I want to see the sum of these three cells in this spreadsheet that I'm showing you here. Well, what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a function, and that function then will allow me to go and add those three values together. The result is then stored in that cell. Again, that cell, those values are only shown in that cell unless I want to put it somewhere else. So it is, the value will be stored here in this case in B5. So we will end up giving the total of those values. Now, in Operator 10 and Synexus, since we do not attach it to a cell, we are actually attaching it to a location parameter. This is done through when you go into setup and you go in, you look at the location parameter, the setup of the data view, and you actually look for it, you can actually go and attach a formula to a given location parameter such as we see here. So in this case, our secondary aeration basin 1, the FM ratio, it actually has a formula attached to it. So that formula is created either via process or through custom formulas, and we attach it that way. We'll go in more detail that here in a second. So with that, one of the things we want to cover is what is a process? And this is an area of the program that a lot of people do not end up using because they're not sure what it does and how it works. So process control, from a water or wastewater standpoint, it's the key part to any of the operations that you do. All plants and all facilities have design criteria. That design criteria is what makes that up. I mean, it tells us what we have to do, why we have to do it to make sure that plant is running efficient. There are different type of processes depending on the type of facility that you have. So if we look here in a municipality in a given sector, depending on what we have may depend on what kind of a process you do and what you can do in the program. For example, if you have, let's say, the wastewater program, and you're out here, technically your entire municipality is a process. We could actually go and see what removals are throughout the system, through a given area. We can also then go to the headworks of the plant and take it from the headworks of the plant to the end of the treatment process, the end of the treatment plant, and actually give that process and show what that is. And with that, depending on that, there's one key element to all these processes. And that one thing is efficiency. It's how well are we doing to make sure that the program works fine and that our system is working the way it is designed. We look at design criteria, a lot of design criteria that you will see in treatment plant in setups. If you look at O&M manuals, they base it on our loadings and our removals that are in a treatment plant, or what our detention times are in given tanks. So like in a water plant, we may have a flocculation chamber that has a set amount of detention time that we have to make so that it runs efficiently. In those efficiency process, a lot of it again is going to relate to how the treatment plant works. a process is comprised of multiple sections. So within a process, so if we look at this diagram of a wastewater treatment plant, a simple treatment plant, each section has its own criteria that they have to do. So for example, an aeration basin, I'm going to have a removal efficiency of X for that time. Over this entire, the FM ratio needs to be this. Again, we're going back to that design criteria of what is needed to work. So how does this relate to the Operator 10 and Synexus programs? Well, in our programs, you're able to define your treatment plan, and in return, you'll get the information needed to run that plant. So for example, here, we are able to define what our influent to our treatment plan is, what our influent flow is, our flow patterns. We're able to define our individual sections or tanks that are available, the volumes of those tanks. And in return, we're going to get different information based on the treatment process. The process will let you see this information in basically a real-life scenario. So by defining your treatment plan, you're going to be able to go in and see your removals, your detention times, your MCRTs, your FM ratios, and a whole lot more host of things. So once it's defined in the program, one of the things you're going to see is you're going to see internal formulas. That process section that I just showed you will allow you to see internal formulas. These formulas, and this is just a partial list that I show you here, are automatically formulas that are developed because of process. So instead of having to write formulas, what we're actually going to do is we're going to give you these formulas, attach them to a given location parameter, and then be able to get these calculations. And as you can tell in this list, it's somewhat pretty basic on how they were. They're standard formulas. Now granted, some of these are for wastewater that you're seeing here, but it's the same way with water. You will have an inventory. You'll have percent removals. You'll have detention times, all based on the given parameters that you have in your setup. We can also, going through a process setup, because of how we do it, we can attach chemicals to a given process. So in a water plant, say you want to go and you want to track your dosage and everything, and you want the program to calculate that information. By defining the chemicals at a given process, we would then be able to give you values such as what the dose rate is, what the milligrams per liter feed is on the pounds done, applied. We can also then give you a cost, because we could actually assign a cost to that. So like say your chlorine is $1 a pound. Well, we can actually go and give you a total cost of what that would be, again, based off of the process setup. With this, and this is the benefit of process, is we don't have to go and create all these given formulas. We do them automatically based on process. That's why it's a benefit, a very strong benefit, to set up that process section in the program. And again, we will be covering the process section in detail in the session 2 of the webinar series. Now, the next step, what if I don't have a formula, or I'm doing a formula that is different, and I want to write a custom formula, and so what's needed? First of all, to create a custom formula, these are the 3 main things that you're going to need. First of all, you're going to want to know the formula you want to create. One of the things I recommend, and we do custom formulas for customers here, one of the things we like to do is we like to see how you do it if you were doing it with a calculator. Give us that detail on how it works. We also then want to see what location parameters that are going to be used in the formula as source data. So for example, if I'm creating a simple pounds formula for my effluent TSS, what I want to do is I'm going to be using the parameter of my effluent TSS, milligrams per liter. I'm going to be using my effluent flow of million gallons a day, and of course the constant of 8.34, which in return will give us our pounds value. Well, that leads to our third point. Where do we want to go and attach those results to? So in that case, I'm going to create a brand new parameter called pounds TSS. I will then attach that formula to that pounds TSS value. In doing so, then anytime I go and run my calculations and I run it, one of the things that we'll end up seeing then is that result at that new parameter. So some examples of some custom formulas that I've seen is one of them, for example, is I've ran into wastewater plants that they run their FM ratio based on COD and not BOD. So that's not a problem. We just write a formula to do it. Now, in the third session, I'd mentioned this before, in the third session, one of the things that we're going to do in this series is we will actually be creating custom formulas. I'll be showing examples of the different types of formulas that we have, that we've created here, that we've had customers ask us or we've done during our setups. And one of the things I want to offer to you is if you have any type of a formula that you would like to see as an example, send them to me. This is our GoToTech email address. If you could send them to this email address along with a subject of webinar formula example types, what I will do is I will take a look at those, and what I'm going to do is, if you can get them to me by the end of next week, what I will try to do is I'm going to try to work them all in as examples. Now granted, if I get a couple hundred of them, I'm not going to be able to do that, but if I have something that's unique, I'm going to try to work those in as examples so that you will be able to see how that formula is created step by step. And that will give you a good option from that standpoint. Now, how do we view the results? Now, there are several ways to see where a formula is attached. I mean, because that's one of the big things is, because like I've mentioned, we don't attach it to a given cell. We attach it to a location parameter. So where can I see all that information at? Where do I see that that's done? Well, first of all, it's in a formula list. The formula list, we can actually attach it. You will see it in two places. When you go and you create a formula, you will see it in the list itself. You'll see where it is attached. When you create the formula, you will actually be asked to attach it to a given location parameter or an LP. And this is where that information is seen. Another one is actually in the location parameter list. I showed you this earlier. We can attach a formula. Again, you will see it in the location parameter list. You'll see what the formula name is, and it will show up there. Now, one of the other things here I want to mention is when you create a formula, one of the things you may want to do is you may want to protect that location parameter. And the reason being is this, and that is done through the location parameter list. We have a protected field. You just check mark it, and it will protect that LP. One of the reasons why you may want to protect that is so that no data can be entered into that field, that location parameter. No data can be changed that is entered in there. So if I run a calculation or I am bringing stuff in via the OPC DDE or the historian interface, or maybe one of the text import that we do, I can bring data in that way, but I don't want anybody to be able to change it. So all we have to do is check protected, and it will do that. It works great for these ones that have formulas attached because I don't want anybody to go in and say, oh, I don't know what this value is, and they go and erase it. Or they go, well, that value is not right, we change it. Well, there's a reason that formula was done that way in the first place. So we protect that from that way. You can also protect other location parameters too. If you have values that are coming in via your interfaces, your historian interface or your OPC DDE, and you don't want those changed, you could actually go and check those as well. That way it does protect that information and saves it from being changed by accident. The next way to view where a formula is attached is in a data view. Now when you go and you open your data view, and some of you may have seen this, especially if you have formulas attached, is up at the top in the column header you'll see a calculator. What I have selected here is one that has a formula attached to it, but it is also a protected one. So when you see the shield or the calculator, that means that the shield means it's protected, calculator means there's a formula attached to it. Now when you go and you do that, one of the things you do is if you were to right click on the column and you go to, what it will show you is it's going to show you the location parameter that you are actually looking at, but it also shows you the formula. And when you see the word formula there, you go off to the right, it'll actually give you the name of the formula that's actually attached to that location parameter. Now the benefit here is this: I can then go and I can click on that formula name, and it'll actually bring me to the formula details, include the actual editor in which I'm using. And with permissions, you will be able to come in here, edit the formula if you need be, make changes, add it to another additional location parameter, and do some things troubleshooting wise. We use this a lot in our tech support, so when we do have a issue, we can go in and we can actually troubleshoot the formulas right here. If you're worried about people getting in here and messing with your formulas that shouldn't, that setting can be done through the security setting in the program. You can go out to your main application and go to File and Security and change access to formulas on individual users if you're concerned about that, and you can control what they're able to do. But if you're creating new formulas, this is a great way of also troubleshooting, be able to do it. Or you created a formula and realized, oh, well, I did a multiplier of 1,000 instead of a multiplier of 100. You could then just go in here and change it without having to go all the way out to the formula section to do that. And this here is it's beneficial from that standpoint to be able to go and look at this information. Now, one of the things, as we get formulas created and as we go through and we add things to the program, one of the things that you have seen have changed is our summaries in a data view automatically calculate automatically. The summaries do. Well, our formulas don't. It's the nature of a beast with a database, unlike Excel, which is being two-dimensional. I think that causes our issue of not being able to calculate automatically. With that being said, there are many ways to calculate formulas. With that, one of the things that you can do is look at, we have several places that you can run calculate. Formulas need to be ran on a regular basis. Again, depending on how often you want to see that updated data. If you are having formulas that are pulling run hours, for example, meter readings for flow meters that are coming in, you want that flow value calculated. Well, if you want to see it every day, you're going to have to calculate every day. If you're only wanting to see it once a month, well, then do it once a month. It's all determined on how you calculate that information and what is being brought in. Calculating in the program is done simple. We try to make it as simple as possible from that standpoint. First of all, one of the places we can do it, and probably one of the common places, is the main application. What we try to do is we try to go in and actually define what is needed at that main application to run the calculations. This gives you access from anybody that's allowed to do it. At the main application, if you go to Tools and you go to calculate, this will allow you to go and give you, basically you get 3 selections. You have a calculate now, which what calculate now does is let you select a date range. You pick a date range of when you want to do it. So if you want to do it for the last year, go ahead and do it. It's going to take a little bit of time to do so, but then it's going to go and you do a calculate now. The next thing is a month to date. It is just that. So if today being the 10th, what it will actually do is it'll calculate from the 1st to the 10th. It'll automatically fill that date range in for you. The next would be previous month to date. So take the 1st of April and run it through today. The benefit of that being is it allows you, without having to select a date range, to do so. One of the suggestions that I always make, and I have people do this, is if I'm running this on a daily basis, one of the things I do like to do is I like to run the month to date, because that way I can go back and always grab, especially in wastewater, say I don't get my BODs and results in until 5 days after. So if I were to just run it for today, I may not get the BODs that I had for last week used in my calculations because, well, they were entered last week, but they weren't entered until this week. So I always like to use the month to date when I run calculate. It just gives that up-to-date process. When you are calculating, one of the things that shows up is when you do select one of those, you will get a start date and an end date. Now, I know several of you have multiple facilities. And if you have multiple facilities, you have a choice. It will always default to the facility that you are in, your main facility, what facility you're active in. So in this case, I was looking at our wastewater sample data. This is the one I'm going to do it. If I had facility ABC and I also had facility 1, 2, 3, well, it's going to go to the default. If I want to do both of them, what I'm going to do is I'm going to calculate by hitting the ellipsis button or the 3-dot button there. I'm going to multi-select by using my control key or my shift key, and I'm going to multi-select both of those facilities, and then I will run calculate for both of those. That way it will run all my formulas and it'll run calculate for that. Now, with that being said, you can also calculate for just a selected formula. Say I created a brand new formula and I've never ran calculate on that given formula, but I want to. It's working, I've tested it, I'm going to get the correct values. So I want to go and I want to calculate for just that formula. Well, I can do that. I can just click on calculate, select formula, go and find that individual formula and run calculate on it. And then what that will do is it will go and it'll run just for that time period for just that one formula. Now, with that said, what is important in this is what is actually being used to calculate formulas. How do we do that? What we do is when you create a formula, there is a calculation order. That calculation order is very important. We calculate in the order in which the formulas are created. So if I create a formula, I have my internal formulas and I create a formula that is basically taking my flow meter and converting it to 1,000,000 gallons a day for my plant flow. Well, technically I need to do it before I do my flow parameter, my internals. Well, we'd have to rearrange those, and that can be done. When we get into the formulas in week 3, we will actually go into how to change that order. So if you are having an issue right now currently with when you run calculations, say you have to run it 2 or 3 times to get that value, the results that you're expecting, well, that's probably due to the fact that you have a calculation order problem. And what can be done is it's a matter of going through your formulas and looking, well, do I need this? What do I need to do this formula? Well, if it's something that's being done beforehand and it's not in the right order, well, you may have to adjust your formula order as need be. And again, like I said, we're going to cover that in the 3rd session. Now, the next place to calculate is in the data view. Data views, if you're in a data view, you've probably all seen this. When you go in, you open it, in the main menu up there at the top, there's a calculate button. When you click on that, again, it is going to prompt you for that date range screen again. Now, one of the questions that I've had asked to me is, well, when I do that, am I calculating just for this data view? No, you're doing the entire database. Another question is, well, when I do this, do I have to do this every time? No, you do not. This calculate does not affect the summaries at the bottom of your data view. This calculate only affects the formula, the internal formulas that are in the from process, and the custom formulas that you've written. That is the only thing that is affected by the calculate. So if you have it on a schedule or you have a way of doing it and it's not a big issue, you can run those as need be outside the main application or via here. Now, the other place that you can get, and this is one a lot of people don't know about, is we can run calculate from the scheduler. The scheduler is actually found out at the main application of the program, and it is ran from the tool menu and set up schedules. Now, one of the things I usually suggest here on the schedules, and we try to suggest makes it a little bit easier, is these schedules should be set up on, if you're doing a server, a client server, say you have a network and your database resides on a network, on a server, we recommend that these schedules be set up on that server. The reason being is because the client PCs may get shut off at night. Well, the server is usually running all the time. And by doing on that, it's not worrying about that network resource to go and calculate that information. So if we go here, one of the first things what you're going to see is this scheduler. Now, your first step is going to be, is you're going to pick your server name and your database you're going to look at. Again, the idea being here is to, again, if you're on the server, it's going to give you your server name and your database. So if you do have multiple databases, you can set each database up on a separate schedule. The second thing you're going to do is you're going to schedule your calculations. Down here when we go and we hit calculation schedule and we hit schedule, one of the things that's going to pop up is it's going to pop up, pick what facility you want to do. Again, if you have multiple facilities, you can multi-select those facilities, or you can have a different schedule for each facility. That's up to your needs on how you want that done. Then you're going to have a days through schedule date. What that means is that is how many days back you're going to run that schedule. Two options that I usually do is I kind of always like to put 7 in there. And one of the reasons why I do is because that way, especially from a wastewater standpoint, if I have, or a testing standpoint, if my BODs that I did last week don't get put in until Monday of this week, well, by going 7 days back, I'm bound to catch those if I need them in the formula. I do have a lot of clients that what they do is they just put a 1 in here. So they run it every night for 1 day back. Once you have that done, then you set your schedule. How often do you want to do it? We can do it, you can set it for, you want it daily, you want it hourly. Again, you can go into the advanced settings. I want it ran every 4 hours, every 24 hours. Your needs are what need to be met here, and you can put that in there. So by doing that, by putting that schedule in there, you are able to go in and actually go and add those schedules. Like I said, If we have multiple facilities, you can set up a different schedule for each one. Now, one of the things that you noticed in this scheduler window is there's some other options that you can put in here. I'm going to throw these in here. I know that doesn't have to do with formula or calculate process, but one of the things with this scheduler, and I'll just mention this, you can also set up a backup schedule as well, and also an import schedule. So if in your backup schedule you want to go and you want to back up your database every night, you could actually set that up to do so. Same way with an import schedule. If you're importing a text file into the program, that can also be set up as well. So set up the same way, you bring them in, you set it up. With that being said, these schedules, what I would recommend, especially from the calculation standpoint, is even though you have a schedule set up and say you have it set for every night, and you're doing it for the last 7 days, what I would recommend doing is at the end of the month, I would suggest to maybe manually go in and run a calculation for the entire month. That way, if there's some data that got changed somewhere in there, or a piece of data got missed and got added later, and so the formula, you weren't getting values, that way prior to you running your reports, any DMRs or state reports that you have to do, or any reports that you have to do, you can actually go and make sure you have all your calculated data there. And it just makes it a lot easier from that standpoint. Now, with that being said, one of the things I want to reiterate is this was kind of today's session was a session to kind of prepare us for what's coming up in the next two, trying to give you a basic understanding of the process section, basic how it works, along with the formula section of how we're going to do it. Next week we will be covering the process section itself. We will actually go in and we will set up a given process. I'm going to give examples of a couple different processes, what is needed and what is going to be received because of that setup. And then in session 3, like I mentioned, we're going to be doing custom formulas. This is where we can go in and actually define each custom formula. Reminder, if you do want a custom formula that you want to see as an example, if there's something unique you want, something unique to your plan or something you haven't seen, drop us an email at thegotech@allmacsoftware.com. I will take a look at it, try to get it to me by the end of next week so I can put that into play. And we will try to put all those examples in that we can. We have, again, if you have questions over anything that we've covered today, you can feel free to drop us an email or give us a call or whatever, and we'll be more than happy to help you. Again, I want to thank you for today's session. Look forward to seeing you next week, and we will proceed from there. So I hope you all have a good afternoon, and we'll talk to you next week.